Welcome to the Mangrove Community, strengthening the community one branch at a time. For more information about the community or how to volunteer, please visit mangrovecommunity.org.
All right, we're live. Welcome back to another episode of Mangrove Community presents Reasonable Doubt. Hey, I'm excited. It's another election season. We have early voting going on for the runoff elections. This is following up or spilling over from the March primaries. So a lot of people who are not familiar with this process, I understand we have a lot of new voters this year, which I'm excited about, man. So that's what we're here for. We're here to educate and inform you on the process. So now we're in the runoff. So in the primaries, you had candidates that went up against one another, and the voting came in so close that they had to go again for a second round of voting. And that's where we're at now. We're in early elections. They'll be going through the rest of this week. And then we have the runoff election on Tuesday, July 14th. So I'm real excited about our guest we have here today. We have Michelle Palmer, and she's running for Student Board of Education for District 6. How you doing today, Michelle?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you. I know you've been pretty busy, so I thank you for taking the time out to come visit with us and speak with the constituents here. Um, how's everything been out on the campaign trail?
Weird. You can't go door to door and talk to voters. So it's definitely been unusual. I've spent the last almost year and a half now running for this office, and the last 4 months have been very strange.
Gotcha. All right. So for those who may not be familiar with you or know who you are, introduce yourself and give us a little bit of information about your background, education, college, career, any information you feel like sharing with us today.
All right. My name is Michelle Palmer, and I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher since 2009. I have taught middle school math, elementary school reading and writing, and high school social studies. And I've been an education advocate, a public education advocate for about 10 years, talking to my congressmen, talking to my state representatives and state senators and state board of education members about how we could make education better. I attended the University of Houston. My degrees are in political science and Russian studies. I wanted to go work for the State Department, but the Soviet Union ceased to exist halfway through my degree. So me and the other Russian studies majors looked around at each other like, what are we going to do now? So I actually went into retail. I worked for Barnes & Noble selling books for about 17 years. And then figured out what I wanted to be when I grow up, and that ended up being a teacher. And I'm running for this position because as a government teacher, I've spent the last 5 years, 6 years now, explaining to my students how the government works, but also, even though it's not in the standards, what their power is in that government, making them research grassroots organizations like Black Lives Matter and United We Dream and things like that, to show them and make sure they understand that not only is voting important, but other grassroots organizations can help you to increase your power and multiply it by getting together with other like minds.
Right. Exactly. So you have a background in books. So I take you like to read, right?
I do love to read.
All right. So, and then we took that into the field of teaching and educating. And you say you've been advocating for over 10 years. You've been pushing for change in the public system and things like that. If elected, well, first, let us know exactly what position you're running for, what area that encompasses, so we know who's able to vote for you, because we have a wide audience here. So,
All right. So State Board of Education, District 6 is pretty much the west side of Harris County. So it's only in Harris County. Goes all the way to the northern border of Harris County.
So like
And in
Cypress
places,
area.
Cypress, Spring, even the very southern part of the Woodlands.
Okay.
Klein, Jersey Village, Cypress Fairbanks, Spring Branch, parts of Katy, A-Leaf, the Galleria area, West Chase, Gulfton, Sharpstown, West U, Greenway.
That's a wide area.
A lot. It's a very large district. It's 10 times the size of a House district because there are only 15 of them in the whole state.
And how many school districts would you say are roughly?
It's parts of 10 school districts.
Parts of 10 school districts. Okay. And so what, and again, we're scaling it all the way back. We want to make sure we don't leave any ground uncovered. What does a state board of education, what do you do in that position?
Okay. So the State Board of Education basically has a few powers. They are in charge of graduation requirements, so they can change that. They're in charge of teacher certification requirements, so they can change that.
Okay.
They're in charge of the largest permanent school fund in the entire country. Texas has the largest permanent school fund, and basically they manage that school fund. One of the things we voted on in 2018 was an amendment to change the amount of the permanent school fund that would go to schools every year. So that's the permanent school fund that helps. It's certainly not all of, as we know, of funding education in Texas, but it's a part of it.
Right.
But the most important things that the Texas State Board of Education does is they create the curriculum that our teachers use to educate our students, and they adopt the textbooks that are based on that curriculum. So that's what I'm really running on. Is we have a lot of deficiencies in our curriculum, in several of the curricula that we teach in Texas, and we have just wrong information that's been put there for political reasons.
Right.
In some of the curriculum. You remember a couple of years ago, there was a textbook, and I want to say Alabama, but I could be wrong, that called Slaves Migrant Workers. That was a textbook that was written for the Texas standards because Texas has such high buying power because we're so huge that most textbooks are written for the Texas standards. So if you live in Arkansas or Alabama or New Jersey, you might be using a textbook, or your children might be using a textbook that was written for Texas, just because we buy so many textbooks, we have so many students.
So it's basically the curriculum and the information that's put in there is geared for Texas because that's the biggest purchaser. Okay, I see what you're saying now. Gotcha.
Yeah, so we need to correct the curriculum so that students across the country aren't being fed propaganda instead of facts.
Wow, that makes, and I didn't realize that's where that was coming from. I knew that they were starting to scale back a lot of the information, like you say, going from calling them slaves to migrants and things like that, or even calling them indentured servants, which is something totally different. Yeah, so that's real important, and I didn't know that Texas was setting that standard because of our buying power when it comes to the textbooks. Yeah, so we definitely we need to look at that, and I'm glad you brought that to our attention here today. And then what else would you say? So textbooks. What else would you say you're focusing on with your campaign?
Primarily, it's the textbooks and the curriculum. I mean, a watchdog organization called Texas Freedom Network that watches the State Board of Education and what they're doing has said that there are 86 factual inaccuracies in just the 8th grade social studies curriculum. 86 factual inaccuracies. I mean, they do things like say that Moses was basically a founding father of the United States.
Moses?
Important guy, but not a founding father of the United States.
Wow, he was a founding father, but I think he was responsible for a lot more people than that.
Right.
Wow, that's very interesting to know, and to know that it's someone who's in tune with that, because And matter of fact, this may fall in one of your districts. Cy-Fair district, I had a family who it was brought, and they were a Black African American, or whatever the term we're being called nowadays. They it was brought to their attention by another parent of a different race, that of a study, or a worksheet that was given out. Sorry about that. It was a worksheet given out, and it was based on slavery, because they were in that era in history. And it was asking questions like, if this slave cost this much and this was this much, how much would a person need to purchase a slave and a bag of corn, or something like that? And that was the curriculum for that day. And what really made it stand out is they kept the paperwork from the Black children to take home. It was a white parent who called the Black parents like, hey, how do you feel about this paperwork they came home with? And she was like, we didn't get it. So it was done intentionally, and it takes people at your level to have an open eye to this and to correct these things, because it is in the curriculum, it's in the textbooks. And that's perfect. That's brilliant. That's a great foundation to run your campaign on, because I believe education is key. What would you do to make sure that the information that is given, especially about this country, America, that the entire truth is given? Because, in today's climate, I think a lot of the issues that are still here, even though we thought they were addressed many, many years ago, is that people are not being truly educated on American history and the roles that the different cultures played within this country and building this country.
Absolutely. That's one of the major parts of my campaign, is that I want to extend U.S. history, which is currently taught half in 8th grade and then the other half in 11th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to take 7th grade, which in Texas is Texas history,
Mm-hmm.
and turn that into instead a 3rd year of U.S. history. So we would stretch the curriculum out over 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
include that Texas history stuff in there.
Right.
But I want to use that 3rd year to include more African American history, more Mexican American history, Asian American, Native
Mm-hmm.
American, and women's history, because
Right.
every one of my students deserves to see the contributions that their forefathers
Mm-hmm.
made to this country, and to see the horrors that were visited upon their forefathers,
Right.
in like the real thing, like not calling slaves migrant workers, not lying.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be learning about things like the Tulsa race riots, Black Wall Street.
Yeah.
They need to learn the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And, I love that that the State Board of Education over the last couple of years has added an African American Studies course and a Mexican American Studies course. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
However, the students that are going to choose to take those courses are not the students that need to learn this stuff.
Right.
White kids need to learn about the contributions of every other group
Mm-hmm.
that this country consists of, and they're not going to choose. I mean, certainly some would,
Mm-hmm.
but the vast majority, the ones that truly need to see what European Americans or white Americans, whatever you want to say,
Mm-hmm.
the horrors visited upon other groups, and to see the contributions made by those other groups
Right.
to form the country that we live in now. That needs to happen, and it needs to happen by extending the curriculum so that it's longer, so that we can fit all of those important issues into it.
Right. And then everyone has their chance to partake in the education.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So how do you feel, or first let me ask you, are you aware of what they call a school to prison pipeline?
I am absolutely aware of it.
What are your thoughts on that? Does it exist? Is it real?
Definitely exists. It's definitely real. The fact that school districts have police departments
Right.
is definitely a part of that, and a reason that it exists. We need to get rid of school district police departments. They shouldn't exist. And we need to hire an army of restorative justice experts to work in those schools, so that those students can learn how to make their lives better, right?
Right.
Restorative justice is something that my principal and I have worked on in both of the last two schools that we've been in, and it has helped so much. The previous school I worked in was a kind of a makeup school where students who had dropped out for some reason, either they were incarcerated or they had a baby or they had to work because their parents were deported, whatever the reason was. They came to that school and we used restorative justice. We tried never to expel a student unless the district forced us to. Right. And restorative justice completely changed lives. We had students who we had to use restorative justice on over and over and over again. By the time they were juniors, they were teaching those restorative justice practices to the freshmen. And that is amazing to watch happen. And every school should have that. I've seen studies of schools that use yoga rooms instead of detention, and how, the amazing things that come from that. There are so many studies out there about things that we can do. And instead, too many school districts are taking the easy way out and the way that they know, which is by bringing in more police and metal detectors and all of these things that make a school feel like a prison. And that needs to stop.
For sure. And hold on one second. I have to do this. And you and I had this prepared, but I put it right out of arm's reach. But I would like to introduce you to this guy if you don't know him already, Carlos Malave. He actually has a curriculum. I believe right now he's in KIP Academy.
Okay.
I mean, either Yes or KIP, don't get me wrong, either one, but he has a curriculum that he actually is implementing into school based on restorative justice. That's his whole passion. So definitely want to get you.
Translation Your Progress? Is that what that says?
Translating Success.
Oh, Translating Your Success. Got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to write it down.
Translating Your Success. Yep. Yeah, so check that out. And I would love to introduce you all, especially if you're an advocate, because I know you'll continue the fight. But
Absolutely.
We definitely want to see someone like you in office, because I love, your campaign and what you're passionate about. And I think that's exactly where we need to be focused in order to make change through our education system. And then you talk about the permanent school fund. How do you feel? What are your thoughts on dividing that money up amongst the school districts?
Well, if we did that, that would have to come from the state legislature, and it would actually have to be a constitutional amendment voted on by the people. Right. The problem with that is right now we don't touch the principal of the fund. We are only using the money that the principal makes through different methods. And so if we did that, then the permanent school fund would probably dwindle to be virtually nothing within, 30, 50 years. Whereas now it never goes down. So I don't know if the permanent school fund is what we need to use to give to the school districts. We definitely need to fund our school districts better. There's a hashtag that's like 25th by 25 or something like that. That is, I think it was created by either Texans for Public Education or Texas Freedom Network. And it's basically, the purpose of it is to say that you support us getting to be 25th in school funding by the year 2025, which is 5 years away. Because right now we're like 43rd in school funding per student. And that needs to stop. We need to fund education more highly. Just this year, just in the last couple of months, when that big federal bill was passed, the CARES Act, that sent all this money to all these people, a huge amount was sent to Texas to be given to the school districts to prepare us buy PPE and plexiglass dividers and all that stuff. And instead, the governor of Texas decreased the amount the state is giving to the districts by the same amount that the federal government gave, So there's no extra money for the schools of Texas. And the parents of Texas don't realize this. They don't know they're sending their kids back to schools in August that have not been given any extra money to clean and put in these protective barriers and all of that. And it's horrifying to a teacher that's going to be in that situation.
That's horrible. And again, you all, this is election season. These are the things that we need to be listening out for. Our governor right now was given federal funds to distribute to the school districts within Texas. But what he decided to do is decrease the school district funding by the same amount that they received federally. So it was a clean wash. The school districts didn't get any extra money, any extra funding. And there's a lot of extra materials and resources that are needed to prepare the classroom for this COVID pandemic that we're going through. So just keep that in mind when it's time to go vote for your governor this year or whenever that time comes.
2022.
Yeah, 2022. Sorry about that. So keep that in mind for 2022 when it's time to vote for your governor. And I wanted to go back to the permanent school fund to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Where does that, so you said I guess there may be like business entities or things that generate funds for the districts or
it's mostly about land.
Mm-hmm.
So a certain amount of land was set aside. I think it was donated by certain like very wealthy families like 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that money was supposed to, it's partially where UT and A&M get their funding as well. So it's not just K-12 schools.
Okay, I guess so. What I'm referring to is because doesn't the property tax play a role in school districts and funding and resources and things like that?
Absolutely. So in counties where, well, pretty much every county, because no county schools get enough money from the state to function.
Mm-hmm.
So the counties have to adjust their property tax to whatever amount to get enough money to have their schools function. But they were kind of handicapped in 2018 because the state legislature and the governor passed a new law capping the amount that counties can raise their property tax.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that is it used to be 50-50. It used to be 50% the county's property tax for funding and 50% from the state.
Mm-hmm.
But before 2018, it had dropped to about 35% from the state and 65% from the counties, which is why our property taxes in Harris County went up so high.
Gotcha.
But then they passed HB 3, which was just temporary, and everyone that was paying attention knew that. It was just the governor and the lieutenant governor wanting to kind of pull one over on the taxpayers by saying, look, we care about education. We passed this bill.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't put any kind of permanent funding into it. So they increased the funding for just this 2 years, the 2019-2020 school year and the 2020-2021 school year.
Mm-hmm.
So when the legislature goes back in January, they have to come up with a way to fund it at that same level, which was a relatively high level, still not getting us anywhere near 25th in the country, but relatively high compared to where we were, or schools are just going to get a lot less money. And it looks like because of everything going on with COVID and the oil price, the oil price at one point this year was in the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge way for Texas, as we know, to generate revenue.
Oh, sure, yes,
Plus,
sure.
we're not buying as much stuff except for online, which means they're not getting that sales tax revenue. So the Texas budget next year is going to be a disaster, which is why the governor basically stole the CARES money from the schools.
Yeah. And I think, and this is just me speaking, and I think what our governor, our elected officials, hello?
I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I thought we went blank. But what our elected officials need to understand, governor, is that things have been mishandled. The system has been abused. And me personally, I feel that we're at a level now where we're dealing with God. We're being judged by God. So they still have time to try to get things right, but they better move fairly quickly if they want to get their act together and see these budgets balance out, because they're not going to balance out if you keep robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that's what's been going on, and to line your own pockets, and to be honest. But we have a long way to go, and I think that that's what people are going to have to realize and come to terms with, of who they're dealing with. And they're not going to be able to hide this anymore from the people. Man.
I think people are waking up. People have a lot more time to look and listen and read during this pandemic, when they don't have, they have to go to work, and they don't have, all of these different forms of entertainment that they're going out and doing.
Right. Less distractions.
And so I think it's the reason that voting is up so high for this runoff, because normally runoff voting is very low. It's like 3%.
Right.
And it's been much higher. It's the first four days were higher than the primary in February and March.
See, hey, you guys are doing a great job. Keep at it. Hey, I'm excited because the whole COVID has changed the conversation. Like, I hardly ever hear guys talk about sports anymore. And that, to me, that was leisure, that was entertainment. The same way we talk about sports, we should have been talking about politics, about candidates who are running, who needs to be traded, drafted, cut, all these type of things. Like, this needs to be a part of our everyday conversation. I'm loving it because more and more people are getting in tune and realizing how much the people you choose to elect you, if they don't side with you in office, how much it can affect your life on a day-to-day basis. And people are really seeing it. Man, that's wonderful. And we talked about COVID. What are your thoughts on going back into the classroom with all of this?
I don't see how we can do it safely with the numbers that we're seeing in Harris County. And the rest of Texas. I mean, there are probably places in the United States that can go back safely.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know if you have children, but can you imagine elementary age children social distancing? Oh. They want to hug their friends.
Right.
I mean, in high school, which is what I teach, I can't imagine the couples not making out in the hallway. Right. I mean, they're going to be spreading whatever they have. And everybody talks about, taking the temperatures when they walk in the door. That's great, except that 50% of positive COVID cases have no fever or any other symptoms, which means they're spreading it without knowing they're spreading it. And they're going to, people that live with a grandparent, which a lot of students do, they're going to take that home to a person who could more easily die from it. I mean, the students could as well, but grandparents, we know how people over a certain age, how they are affected by it. So I'm afraid for others. Like, I am willing to go back if, I'm going to have students in the classroom, I'm going to go back. I know there are teachers that are planning to retire, that are leaving teaching because they're afraid of it. And I understand that.
Right.
I'm not afraid of it. I'm willing to go back in the classroom. I mean, I don't have a husband to pay my rent, so I got to go back.
Right.
But I'm also not afraid of it.
Right.
For myself, and I don't have anyone to spread it to. And I'm not going anywhere else. So if I get it, it's from the school.
Right.
I am afraid that if the governor doesn't call this off, because right now he's ordering schools to go back, he said that, or he and the TEA commissioner have said that if schools don't go back, then they don't get money. TEA right? Yeah. So, Mike Morath is the TEA commissioner. And if that's the case, then school boards have no choice, right? They have to go back.
Right.
Otherwise, they can't pay their teachers and the janitors and the paras and secretaries and everybody, the people in the lunchroom. They have to have the kids back. But so they're the only ones, the TEA and the governor are the only ones that can make this decision to call it off.
Gotcha.
School boards can't.
That's sad. And to even be having that discussion right now on going back to school when the discussion daily right now is trying to get the numbers down is just insane to me. And again, pay attention when it comes time to vote for your governor in 2022, because these are decisions. I think there has been enough exposure to show where the priorities lie with the leadership in both the state and the city of Houston right now. So just keep paying attention, keep doing your research, and that people are going to expose themselves. And then we have beautiful candidates like Michelle Palmer. I know several other candidates that are running who really have a heart and a passion for the people. And we need to continue to vote and continue to get people like Michelle and the other candidates in office who really want to make change for the people and for the community. This system it's fed itself long enough, and the people who chose to handle it inappropriately. And now it's time for a change of regime and to get people in who are going to take care of the communities, the people, the children, and make sure that we are empowered. You know, again, I tell everyone we're not asking for handouts, we're just asking for a hand up. You know, we've been kicked down long enough, and it's our time to shine. So with that being said, food disparities, do you see a way to tackle that or battle that on the school front?
So I've seen several different discussions of this over the last month or so. I've seen something about the federal government giving a $300 one-time donation. I don't know what it is. Allowance for families that are already on SNAP. And I've seen, you know, of course, most of the school districts have continued handing out food, which is great. But I mean, people need to be staying in their houses, and that's you know, as much as they can, going twice a week to your local school to get food, even if it is done in a socially distanced way. You know, you're still having to go out, and I feel like because COVID is more disastrously affecting Black and brown neighborhoods and Black and brown populations, that we need to try and keep the families that can as quarantined as possible. And I don't know how that's possible. We have so many food deserts in the Houston area, neighborhoods where there's only one grocery store and they don't have a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables, things like that. I think that the city and the county could do something to help with that. In addition, we've got the banking deserts, which are at least as bad, because what happens when you don't have banks in a neighborhood is that's when, because all around me, there are title loan places and payday loan places. And in my economics classes, when I've taught them, I've said, if you walk out of my class knowing nothing else, you will know, do not take out a payday or title loan, because it is literally a spiral that makes you poorer and rich people richer. And that is not the way I want my students to end up. So, you know, there are so many different ways that food insecurity can be dealt with in schools. We definitely should never have the situations that you hear about occasionally where a student doesn't have any money on their account, and so the school won't give them food. That should never be the case. HISD, after Harvey, made it so that every student in HISD got free breakfast, free lunch for the entire school year. And then that went so well, they didn't stop it.
I remember that.
So if they can afford that, as massive of a school district as that is, then so can every other school district.
Right. And isn't HID like the second or third in the country?
It's the seventh largest school
Oh,
district in the country, largest
okay.
in the state of Texas.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's best. That's a good blueprint to follow. Top 10 in the country. Definitely something that can be replicated. What do you think about community gardens at school? The It can help fill that gap you said with the food disparity
Absolutely.
and
I
not
mean,
having fresh
there
produce.
should be fruit trees
Hmm.
on any city property that exists. There should be fruit trees. I was reading an article a month ago about how some city architect, realized that male trees don't produce as much like stuff on the ground as female trees do, because female trees drop seeds.
Right.
And so because of that guy deciding that, almost every city in the country only plants male trees, which
Mm,
means they don't develop any fruit.
right.
And they're also worse for pollen. They produce a lot more pollen,
Hmm.
which is why most of us have so many allergy problems. But if we were putting out fruiting trees
Hmm.
in cities, then there would be fruit available in neighborhoods all over the place. In
Right.
addition, schools that have because a lot of schools have really big park areas, right?
Right.
We
Hmm.
could take a little piece of that park and make it into a garden. Not only could we teach students where food comes from, because a lot of city kids, they don't ever see that. I never
Right.
saw that as a
Right.
kid.
Yeah.
um, so we teach them that, but also it's food, right? That food could either be used in the cafeteria or it could be used by people in the neighborhood.
Exactly. Let's see, and that's where we should be going with our thought process, because every community has a school within it, if not a few.
Yeah,
And like you say, we can produce enough for the school, maybe for the community, and then it also teaches skills. You can teach job skills when it comes to farming and agriculture and things like that, that these children can take and say, hey, I have a little bit of experience when I'm coming out of high school, on the job experience, and I can show you where we started a farm and grew it from seed, yeah, so definitely, is that something that well, that wouldn't necessarily fall in your wheelhouse, would it? Is that more legislation or?
I mean, it could be legislative, but it
Mm,
would probably be by school district, or if you have a district like HISD is a very decentralized district, so the
mm-hmm.
schools make a lot of their own decisions. So just a
Gotcha,
campus principal could make a decision to do that.
gotcha. So,
Probably in conjunction with a community organization is probably the way they would do that.
cool.
But my district, I teach in Aldine,
Hmm.
and my district is very centralized. So that would have to come from either the school board or the
Yeah.
superintendent making that decision.
Go Cougs, Nimitz.
I went to Nimitz my freshman year.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Cool.
probably a long time before you did.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Especially, so it'll basically take a little bit of influence depending on if you're dealing with the centralized school or decentralized. And yeah, another, like you say, community organization that I know of that's doing the work, actually had a meeting with them today, is Buff Texas, the Black United Fund
Mhm.
Texas. They have a few gardens in the Fifth Ward area, working on some in the Acres Home area, and they're looking to, and basically what they're looking to do is build new gardens, or take gardens that already exist, community gardens, and get them back up to par if they need to. So hey, this can be a citywide project if we get the right people involved.
Absolutely, or countywide even.
Yeah, definitely. Well, man, it was lovely talking to you, and speaking with you. What do you have anything coming up where the people can catch you?
At this point, I'm mostly standing at West Gray Multi-Service Center
Okay.
in the mornings and in the afternoons. I'm still teaching summer school classes, so in the middle of the day, I'm here in front of my computer teaching. Um,
Uh,
but
God bless you.
7 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 7 in the afternoon, I'm at West Gray. I don't have much else that's going on at this point.
Okay. What about your Facebook page, websites? Where can we find you at on social media?
PalmerforTexasEd.com is my website. Palmer, the number 4 Texas Ed is my Twitter. And I think Palmer for Texas Ed as the suffix on my on Facebook is my Facebook website. So yeah, and Instagram is Palmer for Texas Ed as well.
Cool. Well, again, it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you for the information.
My pleasure. It was really nice talking to you.
Likewise. And I learned a lot of information, especially about things that are being taught in the school district and things like that I was really not aware of. And I thank you for that. And thank you for educating us on, the State Board of Education and what they do. And we look forward to you. And hey, continue to follow Michelle Palmer. This is all about you being informed, making an informed decision when you go to the poll. We're not only asking you to vote now, but we're asking you to make an informed vote. So continue to look her up and follow her. And hey, if she fits and lines up with what you see and what you want out of your school and your education system, then vote for her. And before we go, again, like I tell everyone, and you see, my back is against the wall. When our back is against the wall, you choose to fight or run. Hey, it's on you to decide what you want to do. I'm going to choose to stand and fight for justice. So again, whatever that passion is, whatever that thing that is that's burning deep down inside, that's your purpose, that's your calling. Act on it today. Don't wait another day. Move on your purpose. Y'all be blessed. Again, y'all get out and vote. We have the remainder of this week to get out and vote. And then we have the runoff election on July 14th. So let's continue to vote, continue to educate ourselves. We still have a long way to go. We still have a few months into November. Again, it was a pleasure, Ms. Palmer. I wish you the best on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
Hope to see you in November.